We looked at a lot of properties before we bought this place, and it was a very rundown bungalow, and we knew that it was going to be a project. So we then set about trying to find people that we could work with to transform the bungalow into a sort of dynamic, interesting and creative space. I wanted to work with the parameters of what was already here, which was this 1966 bungalow that kind of sat on the site on the hill with a view. And I didn't want to start from scratch. I can't really do waste.
You know, fundamentally it was a strong, very sturdy building, but in terms of insulation value and quite often the way they're laid out just doesn't really work. But often have these really big gardens as well, which is really nice. And that was very much the case here, kind of wonderful garden with the bungalow kind of at the top looking out of the view with the kind of garden cascading down below.
We didn't quite realise how special the location was. And we talked with some different architects, but nobody came with a spark in their eye. And walking around with Thomas, I could see that he had, you know, he shared his enthusiasm. And he was game on for working sort of collaboratively.
One of the tricks is often to kind of wander around the garden and think, where do I really want to sit? Or even asking people, when you go outside with a kind of cup of tea on a Sunday morning, where would you stand and look? And that's quite a good sort of hint at where a good room could be. And often people think, oh, well, I realise that that's a really nice place to stand in the garden, but I hadn't thought about that as a place for a room. And so I think that can be a really good indication of where you can make social space. Having a building that just faces in one direction, quite often that means the outside space isn't very well contained and can feel a bit exposed. So actually quite often it's quite nice to produce a kind of an L shape to a building to create a kind of a courtyard area outside. But also in this case the view was very much off and to the right, and so actually extending a room out into that view really kind of extends it out into the garden. By putting this L shape out, you get the view on actually three sides there.
I'd never have thought of that, and it was really fun trusting them that they would, that their excitement for that bit of the design was going to be the magic bit. I kind of wanted to also work with that idea of repurposing all the materials that we were going to be extracting from the building. As we were deconstructing, I saved everything that I possibly could, because it's very important to me that there was no waste, or as little as waste as possible. So yeah, we salvaged wood, everything we could, ceramics, even it was left with lots of furniture in, and I've repurposed a lot of the furniture. And now things like the skirting boards, and the architrave has become flooring because it was all hardwood, and other bits have become shelves. And then we couldn't obviously use that wood on the outside, but we made sure that we bought sustainable red cedar.
The kind of trick is, can you design something that has no compromises in it, but at the same time is kind of fitting and keeping as much of that old structure as possible? And that's a really fantastic challenge. It's often quite difficult. It's more difficult than designing a new build, because a new build, you've got you don't have any constraints.
You know, they created this beautiful space which I could never have come up with.